Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to the channel and thank you so much for taking your own time out to check out this next installment into the Michael J. Fox filmography. So I've been doing several of these movies by myself and I've also been doing them as part of collaborations. And today is a collaboration with my good buddy Dave from Interpreting the Stars, which we'll hear from in just a moment. But today's movie, we're talking about the 1996 movie, which actually released on July 19 of 1996, and that is The Frighteners. Now, if you're unaware about The Frighteners, it is this beautiful movie right here, which I've really got like a cool steelbook Blu-ray set of as well, and it's directed by Peter Jackson. I don't really need to explain Peter Jackson by this point. The music is also done by a person I don't need to explain, Danny Elfman, and a producer, same again, Robert Zemeckis. So we've already got some really big names attached to this project, and it's just amazing the names. When you look back these now, you think, wow, these guys and girls had involvement in this movie in 96. That's just crazy. And our lead cast member here as Frank Bannister is Michael J. Fox, of course, fitting into the Michael J. Fox filmography. Now, we've also got Trini Alvarado, Jeffrey Combs, and Dee Wallace. So we've also got a big cast in this movie, which had a budget of $26 million. Now, I just want to give you guys a quick little bit of backstory here. This movie wasn't very successful at the box office. Its return was $29.3 million, so only $3.3 million more than the budget, which isn't a lot for a movie. Now, a big issue of this, and the big reason for this, is Universal Studios. Simply because Robert Zemeckis and Peter Jackson pitched to the studios, and originally this was supposed to come out in around Halloween time of 1996, so around October, which I think this would have been a perfect release given that this is like a horror comedy, it's kind of a ghosts, and I think this could have actually generally been a traditional kind of like Halloween based movie for a lot of people, probably myself included. But instead the studio received kind of like an early screener for it, really impressed by what they saw, and thought, well, let's move it up to the summer and market this as a summer blockbuster, which did not pan out for them, unfortunately. Yeah, this movie flopped pretty much at the box office, which isn't great, but it had the makings of being that big star-studded kind of movie of 1996. Now, I think this is kind of underrated, and it has gone on to be a cult classic, which I'm really happy that it has, because it deserves it. But definitely the mismarketing by Universal really harmed this movie. Now, this is also considered to be one of Michael J. Fox's kind of last leading movie roles, because around the time of this, and he does explain this in his biography, Lucky Man, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend you to do so. He explains that at the time, he was constantly on film sets. Like, he'd finish a movie, he'd be back on another one, and then he'd finish one, back on another one, rinse and repeat kind of situation. And because of that, he was missing his family. He wanted to be at home with his family and not so far away. So this was kind of his last role, because I believe this was shot in New Zealand, if I'm not mistaken. And because of that, he actually made this his last kind of main feature movie role, and then he went back on to kind of TV work, and he went on to Spin City. So this is very interesting for Michael J. Fox, and to answer one of Dave's questions very quickly, which he will mention a little bit later, this is the only kind of horror-based movie that Michael J. Fox ever made. I think he would have made more of them if this movie was released in around Halloween when it was supposed to, and it was probably better received in terms of money-making, and also the fact that his Parkinson's starting to play a factor into this. So anyway, the plot of this movie is all around:
after a tragic car accident that kills his wife, a man discovers that he can communicate with the dead to con people. However, when a demonic spirit appears, he may be the only one that can stop it from killing the living and the dead.
Thank you, Dave, for that plot synopsis. Yeah, so this movie is very interesting, guys. I showed this to my partner, Emma, for the first time, because I was like, look, as part of the Michael J. Fox filmography, I want to watch this movie. It had been several years since I watched it, and she'd never seen it. And after the movie, we both really enjoyed it. I think this movie does hold up for a lot of parts, to be honest. It's very unique, it's very different, and Michael J. Fox proves once again, going into more of a serious, more based movie, he can pull it off. Now, I know he is mainly known for doing comedy, and that is kind of what he's famous for with his kind of movie career and sci-fi work, but stepping into the genre of horror, and especially that of horror comedy, he pulls off this role of Frank Bannister really well. Yet again, even when he's playing a dick of a character at times, he's still likable. You still want to root for the guy, and you're still like, wow, I hope Frank makes this out alive, and I hope he's gonna be okay. And I definitely think that this movie has a lot of twists and turns, and at times keeps you guessing, or at times you think, like, wow, okay, I didn't expect this to happen, and then it happens, and I think that is just kind of something magical about the Frighteners. And as soon as I saw this box set, I knew I had to pick it up, because it's very limited as far as I'm aware, probably out of print by now, and it's just a beautiful, gorgeous steel book, and of course it goes in the physical media collection, which is never really a bad thing. The performances all around here are really good. I especially really liked Jeffrey Combs' character of Milton, and kind of reading a bit of the trivia and backstory about this movie, he had a lot of suggestions and ideas for his character to kind of be this like bombastic, very memorable character, and he definitely pulls that off in the movie, and I can only give props to Pete Jackson for allowing that kind of creative and freedom within his character to make him as this really unique kind of attitude, personality, and that's certainly what he delivers. Trini Alvarado as Lucy is kind of like the love interest for Michael J. Fox's Frank Bannister here. Also does a good part. I like both of them in the role. They kind of vibe of one another, and it's very easy to follow along with their friendship, develop it into kind of like a love romance as such. Yeah, both likable characters. Again, all around the cast are solid. Now, I do have one or two negatives here, but before I dive into that, I want to hand it over to my good buddy Dave from Independent Stars to hear what his thoughts are on Frighteners.
Hey, it's Dave again from Interpreting the Stars, back on Mike's channel, joining him for this epic Michael J. Fox-a-thon, and he has asked me to join him to talk about Michael J. Fox's only real jump into the world of horror with a little film called The Frighteners. So big thanks to Mike for inviting me to see this movie. For me, it's my first experience with it, but I've always seen this poster floating around in certain circles, and the main reason for that is because of all the names associated with it. Not only do you have Michael J. Fox in what appears to be his only horror film, but you also have Peter Jackson directing and even partially writing it, Robert Zemeckis producing, and Danny Elfman scoring it. Those are a collection of some pretty massive names, but in the 90s, a lot of these people were just kind of starting out, so did they still have what it takes to make a really good, memorable film? To a degree, absolutely. The Frighteners was a very unique horror comedy that works very well, but at the same time, it has aged a bit. So again, this is a unique horror comedy in the sense that the horror aspect is very horror, very dark, very scary, at least for the 90s. And then you have a comedic side, which is on the complete opposite side of the same spectrum, where it's very, very goofy, almost to a cartoon level goofy. The only way that you can make a movie flow really well when you have these two very, very, very different genres is by having an actor or character that basically serves as an anchor. So they needed somebody that could play serious and funny at the same time, and boy oh boy was Michael J. Fox the right choice. I'm always looking for actors that can fit their roles really well, and because Fox is such a well-versed actor in terms of differing atmosphere in film, he actually kills it in the role. I had to ask myself, could anybody else play this role? And I don't know. If they did, it would be a very, very different movie. For instance, if I replaced him with Doc Brown, Christopher Lloyd, I think he'd play the comedy parts of the movie amazingly. But when tasked with the dark, horror, scary aspects, I feel like he wouldn't fit in at all. But Michael J. Fox does because he's that type of actor. I'm honestly shocked that he never played horror again. Mike, you follow his career a little bit more closely than I do, so maybe you know something that I don't. But I don't believe he ever dipped his toes in horror again. Now, it is a flawed movie, though. Back in 1996, visual effects were still in their early stages, but in the 90s and early 2000s, we often got an overabundance of them because studios were just testing them out. That's a big reason why, in this decade of film specifically, a lot of movies ended up being kind of corny. And The Frighteners has some very questionable graphics going on. The visuals are definitely aged here, both in CGI terms like the walls that stretch out when a ghost pokes his head about, as well as some problems with green screen work. A lot of the edges of the characters are blurred in certain scenes, for instance, which just wouldn't happen in today's world. But I still think that the movie is incredibly unique and original. I haven't seen anything like it before. Interestingly enough, though, a book series that I've read and really enjoyed reading was Dean Koontz's Odd Thomas series, which this movie somewhat reminded me of. Odd Thomas wasn't a con man like Michael J. Fox was, but he had a similar attitude whenever he would see ghosts, which was kind of like acting like it's just another Tuesday, whatever. And Odd Thomas would have a sarcastic wit about him, and would often run into a bigger, darker problem that he has to fix by the end of the book, similarly to the Grim Reaper storyline seen here. So one of the main reasons why I like this movie won't really be relatable or applicable to many people, but it is one of the main reasons why this was a lot of fun for me. My end score is going to be really easy, actually, because I have the same score for my technical, unbiased perspective as I do for my biased. That's because this film is as fun as it is good. The visuals aren't always the best, of course, but I think everything else was mostly put together really well. There's an assortment of characters that were really, really interesting, comedic, and mysterious at times. The tone of the film was something that I would imagine to be really difficult to pull off because it's so dark and so horror-related, but also really cartoony goofy at the same time. But I do think they really pulled that off really well. Cinematography isn't bad, could be more memorable, I suppose, but as it is, I gotta give props. Ultimately, not a lot of complaints from me. I think it's corny at times, sure, but, you know, that's it. So both my unbiased and biased scores were 80%, meaning that when we combine those two together, what do we have? 80%, obviously. 80 out of 100 possible stars, which is not bad at all. So there you have it. One last time, thank you for inviting me over to your channel to talk about this movie, Mike. I had a blast with it, but I'll leave it to you now to finish out your thoughts on The Frighteners. And until next time, peace out.
Dave, my man, thank you so much for joining me for this outing of the Michael J. Fox filmography about The Frighteners. Loved hearing your thoughts, and I believe this was a first time watch for you as well, so I'm really glad that for pretty much most part of this movie, you really enjoyed. Now, I do know that you said you had a couple of negatives with kind of like the visuals here, and that is definitely something that I want to touch on here, like the visuals. I've got to agree with Dave. A couple of moments here, you can just tell like it's green screen, you can tell like the visual effects weren't up to par, and to be honest, like watching it nowadays, and especially when I watched it in 2022, it's kind of laughable, you know. I guess at odd little times it takes you out of the moment, but not too much, because the rest of the movie then helps you to kind of pull back in with its impressive like set locations and just the uniqueness of the movie. But yeah, definitely the visuals don't hold up as well. Now, I do know that The Frighteners is getting a 4K release, so I'll be intrigued to see what the 4K transfer will look like, and if that will kind of improve any of the visual looks of the movie, or if it won't. But yeah, I loved hearing Dave's thoughts, and I love the comparison what you were mentioning there, Dave, about Odd Thomas. Yeah, I've never heard of that book series. Yeah, I haven't heard of it, but it's pretty cool to hear that you could kind of bring some similarities of that to this movie, and you thought, wow, okay, well, this is unique, Dave. Yeah, I've got to agree with you. One thing about this movie is it's certainly unique, and it's certainly something different to any other movie that's kind of been made. So go check out Dave's channel in the link down below in the description box. Go subscribe to his channel. Go check out his awesome content. He has a lot of awesome stuff, and he's also making a movie called Secret Seam with yours truly starring in it as well. So definitely check out Dave's channel and tell him that I sent you. Now, in terms of negatives, definitely the visuals, as I touched on. I'd also say that there's one or two moments here. It's trying to balance this horror and comedy aspects to the movie. For like 99% of the time, that works. But I think there is like one or two little odd moments here that I think didn't really work so well in balancing that kind of tone of the movie, and could have been done a little bit differently. But besides that, I don't really have many negatives with this movie. It's just overall a good, fun time. A movie of the 90s, but still one nowadays that you can enjoy. And you look at the resume of people that are attached to this project, and you think, wow, this is something unique. So with that in mind, my overall score for The Frighteners is a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So if you've seen The Frighteners, or if you haven't, and maybe you fancy it, or maybe you don't, I'll leave any and all comments down below. I'd love to hear from you guys and continue the discussion down there. Thank you to Dave once again for joining me for this awesome collaboration. Great to have him as part of the Michael J. Fox filmography. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a big thumbs up, and also subscribe to the channel by clicking that red button down below so I can see you again on a future video. Also, if you're unaware, I do have a Patreon. I have a couple of tiers you can select from, which starts from £2 per month. month. And these tiers do include like early videos, my release schedules, see what goes onto the channel. You can actually pick out movies for me to review. There's so much stuff to find out about my Patreon. The link is down below in the description box if you want to check out more. And I want to give a big special thank you to all my awesome Patreons who help support the channel. And thank you for watching this video, and until the next time that I see you, I'll be seeing you later.